Okay, this is the last module. It is a shortened module because I've taken some things out of it over time. The main purpose of the adoption competency training is the way we do it at Circle of Friends anyway, is to train the therapist on how to work with adopted families. And it's a different model of treatment than it is with individual therapy. You're always going to be working as a family unit. You're going to be working specifically on attachment. You're going to understand, as we keep talking about, the core issues of adoption, which have to do with loss and guilt and shame and rejection and all the things that we talk about. So um, as we have worked to refine this training to make it more accessible to you or useful to you, we've taken some of the things out that Rutgers put in and put in some of the things that we thought were important for therapists and people working with these families to have. So we're going to do the last module. I am going to show you the second video of Zoe's removal. It's short, but I think you'll find it impactful. And then we're going to just talk about some different ways to do this work. So as I say, it is usually a shorter day. And I think I shared with you before, when people come in person, the trainings last a lot longer because people talk. It's always a lot more challenging to do anything on Zoom. But what I am going to ask you to do, and since you have to leave a little bit early, maybe we'll do it earlier in the morning, is that I'd like each one of you to tell me what you're taking away from this. If you're taking away anything good, if you're taking away nothing, if there are things that you would like to see added to this. I change this all the time as I get feedback from people about how the training has been for them. So we're going to do some of that. So let me get into the share. Okay, and as you see, this is the titles are fairly generic. I keep changing the titles too, because the titles of each module are like therapy with young children, therapy with older children, therapy with adopted children. This is all about therapy. So that's what we're doing today. Um, and again, we're just going to go over some of the clinical issues that we are always going to be looking at with adoptive families. And I want you to be assured that they're always going to be there. I mean, we have very few, I can't think of any adoptive families that we have worked with that have not had all of these issues of loss and guilt and not understanding why these kids aren't attaching the way they think they should be attaching and all of those types of things. So um, that's really going to be our main objective today, is to really just do an overall. I'm going to show you one video that we put together on our YouTube channel that really just talks about how are we doing therapy with you. And it was a video that we put together for adoptive parents to say, this is what we're doing. This is why we're here. This is what we're going to do. And adoptive families usually find that that's helpful. If they have an idea about, if they think that you know what you're doing, and that's why you're here. So um, I am going to let you watch Zoe first, because I think you will find that the second one really does wrap up the story of what happens to kids when they get removed, which we all know because we all work with kids who have been removed.
Oh, you can think about your own story. You could not heal me. You're not a healer. You cannot save me or hide me. This is my story. I have to make peace with it. Once upon a time, there was a girl who was being torn apart. In between the homes, she learned not to trust. Always have regret.
ways have you maintained a parent and child relationship?
I love that.
The issue with this hearing is not whether or not you love your children or if they love you. The issue is, at this point, if you have a parent-child relationship with your children, and if it would bring them harm for that legal relationship to be terminated.
Ms. Locke, do you understand the purpose of this hearing?
Yes.
So you understand that this hearing is to terminate your parental rights. Do you understand that if the judge terminates them, you will no longer be the legal mother of your children?
Sometimes my life feels like a circle, a never-ending, ongoing cycle. But I don't know how to stop them. Or change it. Or break it. When I finally come close, starts all over again. A whirlwind. Set out to destroy me. Hi.
Hi, I think I'll be another 15 minutes.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Sometimes things begin to get better. Once upon a time, she was an astronaut, and she was stuck in space because she lost her rocket ship. She didn't know how to get back to Earth. Life falls to a new rhythm. Under your story. You're so smart. New normal. If you went through the atmosphere, that's a big word. Can you say atmosphere? I'm scared. And it may not be the best. But I've made peace with it. And it feels like almost I might be happy. Maybe I can write my own story. Start from scratch. Forget all the past.
What's this one about?
Oh, this one's a turkey.
Did you know there are tornadoes in outer space? All right, Zoe, we have a visit with your mom today. Go pick up your brother.
But then, of course, someone else makes a choice and leaves me alone to figure it out.
Now, remember, this is your last visit with Anaya.
Isn't there anything I can do to change it?
You need to prove that you're taking steps to get your life back together.
I know. Then my life doesn't have to be this way. Do I help him? Now try. Now you want to do the other one? Pick up down. Let me take my socks off. He likes airplanes, doesn't he? So hug you goodbye. Please hug you goodbye.
Really? We have some guests coming over this evening.
Well, come. I'm gonna get in rocket ship.
Response?
Yeah, heard you. Can you get in a rocket ship, honey?
Well, thank you so much for letting us come on short notice.
That's okay, come right in. Hi.
This is Emily.
I'm Kyra.
Hey, Kyra.
Hi, nice to meet you.
You're very excited to meet Benaya.
Oh, that's great. For Zoe. Because she can't handle him being taken away from her again.
They'll have bi-weekly visits indefinitely, and I know it's not ideal.
I'll go get him. Find your sleeves. There you go. Use your muscles. Let me see your muscles, Benaya. Yes. This is Miss Emily.
Hi.
How you doing? I have something for you. You want to open it? Ooh, what do you got? You're a spaceman. That's pretty cool, Benaya. This is one we actually decorated in. Yeah, I'll make sure to keep that in mind.
Where's Kyra?
Hey, she had to leave early.
Zoe. Zoe, wait. Zoe. No, listen.
When I finally come close, starts all over again.
What are you working on in school?
Homework.
You still like to draw? I always liked your drawings. I love you. Hey, I loved you. And I'm gonna fight to get Benaya back. My mom never fought for us, but I'm gonna fight for him.
What about me? Don't you want me to?
Of course. You're not a kid anymore. You're all grown up.
When I close my eyes and see my life, the life I always imagined, I see something different. from what I see.
She may have some negative side effects to it. This will help with moments of uncontrollable anger. I really believe this will make life easier.
Zoe doesn't need meds. She needs more therapy. She needs more interaction with her mom.
You see what I do, but forget why.
You'll still get a chance to come in. Hopefully twice a month, maybe even more. I've already set up a play date for this weekend.
Why do they think they can just have him? They aren't his parents.
If it doesn't work, we can always up the dosage or add a second medicine to it to help you feel a little less sad or angry.
But why wouldn't you?
You forget what I've heard. You forget what pain.
Well, the courts have said that your mom has.
What? I'm not good enough for that?
That's not it at all, Zoe.
I explode inside. And sometimes slowly. Sometimes all at once. But always eventually.
What are you reading?
The Wizard of Oz.
Oh yeah? Is it good?
Yeah. Better than the movie. In the book, Oz is a real place. It's not just in her dream. The tornado catches her up and it takes her away to a real place.
Is that you?
No. She's trying to escape, but the tornado keeps pulling her back in. She keeps spinning and spinning.
It's not always about escaping though. Sometimes you have to learn how to survive inside of it. There you are. Right in the middle of all that spinning, you can let that tornado rip apart your heart, or you choose how to let what has happened to you affect you. Your mom's story doesn't have to be your story. Your future can be different. Remember that. Remember what happens to her? We get a chance to visit Benaya.
These tornadoes are actually for you. When a star is being born, it only comes out of a tornado. If high winds, super dangerous. To survive. Oh, well, all that. That's there's no worse stars.
Zoe, you wrote this in your diary. Sometimes someone hurts you so bad, it stops hurting at all. Honey, what are you talking about when you wrote that? If you were to go home to live with your mom right now, would you be safe?
Objection, Your Honor. Calls for speculation.
Objections sustained.
Once upon a time, there was a girl who was being torn apart.
We have a prosecutor today.
No, Your Honor.
Maybe you never thought your path would cross these valleys or be led up these mountains.
This law, you have named simple. However, what you,
And no one can break the inside,
but we cannot continue to wait.
and no one can tell me who I will be.
She needs permanent stable. I find that this is something that's so competitive.
And the question looms. I have the choice. Where to go. We are stars. Born of fire, wind, into chaos. That's what birth is. No one stays with us. Everything we know is taken.
I know it can be hard when you're living in a home that's not your own. Hard to concentrate and stuff.
But one day,
You don't have to draw. Just remember that you get to decide who you want to be. Okay? No one else can do that.
one day. Thanks, Miss Zoe. You will shine.
Okay, let's talk about that a little bit. I've seen that many times. It gets me every time. Um, If you've been in the field of child welfare for any length of time, you see all of these things that go wrong. What stood out to you about the second half of that story? What went wrong that could have not gone wrong? There was a lot that went wrong for Zoe, but what went wrong for her?
Mostly the separation of her brother.
Yeah,
Her behavior was so much better when he was with her.
sure. Yeah, I think we do underestimate the damage of sibling separation. And it's one of the things that we get called on to testify in court about. And whether or not siblings should be separated. And it's not a call that I want us to try to make because we really can't make that call. But we certainly have our opinions about it. And it's one of the things that we talk about as we're staffing cases. Um, One of actually, it's our program manager from the West Coast, a few years ago was called in to testify. There was an older brother and two younger sisters in a foster home. And of course, as often happens, the foster parents wanted the two little girls because they were little, they were cute. The boy was acting up a little bit, so they didn't want him. And the question was, should the little girls not be separated from their brother and then not be adopted? So it was a conundrum. I mean, there was no good answer to this. But the question that was asked of the therapist was, will it harm them to be separated? And it was an impossible question to answer because of course, they're going to be harmed. Will they survive? Probably with the proper support and help. And however she answered the question, it wasn't what the judge wanted to hear. He got really angry with her. He wanted her to be taken off the case. The CLS attorney was angry with her. And we had this big staffing where everybody came in. And I can remember saying to the CLS attorney, I thought that the standard rule of lawyerdom was don't ask a question if you don't know what somebody's going to answer that question. And they hadn't prepared her, they hadn't met with her, they hadn't told her what they were going to ask her. And I think, as she said to me afterwards, what I was trying to say was, it's not dogmatic. Of course, they're going to be harmed if they're separated. Can they survive? I think her further answer was they probably will survive if we support them. But sibling separation is a big thing. And Charmaine is right. It was the worst thing that happened to this child. It explained her explosions, her anger towards the poor foster mother who was a saint. What else happened to her that could have been avoided?
I don't know if I missed something last time or this time, but I don't understand why the rights were terminated so quickly. I mean, it seemed like the mom was a victim of domestic violence. Like I didn't see substance use or like she was physically abusing them, like maybe neglect.
Yeah,
But-
what Rebecca is saying is that she didn't understand why the TPR portion came so quickly, and it probably was theatric license.
Yeah, 'cause that shouldn't happen like that.
Right, and normally it doesn't, and I think, and also because the second video is a lot more stylized than the first one.
Yeah.
So what you heard the judge, if you could hear the judge saying, he was terminating her rights.
Yeah.
He was saying that she had not made sufficient effort. She was a victim of generational abuse. She talked about her mother not fighting for her. She was a victim of domestic violence. The children were certainly neglected. She neglected Zoe in favor of Bediah. And didn't kind of parentified Zoe because Zoe was taking care of Bediah. What about Bediah's adoption? What about the way that was handled? Because we've certainly seen that happen before.
And just taking him away without telling her, that's so traumatic for both of them.
Yeah.
Unnecessarily so. I mean, there's no reason to do it like that sneakily and while she's at school. I can't see a reason, but
No, there isn't a reason. And the
Yeah.
sad thing, Rebecca's saying she can't see why they would have done it that way. They snuck it on her. They didn't tell her, they didn't prepare her. She came home and found him gone. I'd like to say that that never happens, but it does. Um, we, as a child welfare community, don't always make the best decisions. And in fairness to all of us who've spent our life's work doing this, it is very hard to make good decisions. And very often, and we're certainly seeing it in our child welfare community right now, that eh, lead agencies are giving up contracts, they're losing contracts. Um, People are coming to work who have no background, who've had no experience. And because there's right now, especially on the West Coast and to some degree in Central Florida, there's some upheaval in our community-based care agencies. I don't think that people are being given the best supervision, the best oversight, and decisions like this to remove him quickly, to remove him without preparation for the older sibling, those things do happen. And when I say to all of you that sometimes the damage is done by parents, and we remove children, we put them in foster care, and then there's more damage that we pile on top of it because of the inherent chaos of our system. So he's removed, he's not, she's not telling him where, or being told where he's going. What about the psychiatrist?
He
Did you-
wanted to medicate her.
Abs-
Medicate, over medicate, really.
And don't we see that all the time too? I mean, we certainly see our kids. If you listen to the dialogue, and I know, again, I've seen it many times, but one of the things that she's saying is that this is why I'm doing this. I can't control myself. I'm angry. I miss my brother. I miss my life. My life isn't what I thought it was going to be. So our solution to that is to medicate. And what happens if the medication doesn't work? What do we do then? We up the dosage, or we add a second med. You heard him say, well, will up the dosage, or we could add a second med. And that, unfortunately or fortunately, that is what happens. We have to keep kids in foster care calm enough, if you will, so that they can stay in placements. Because if they explode, if they have Baker Acts, if they have outbursts of temper, then we have foster parents putting in 30-day notices. And then we have all of that chaos that goes along with that. So um, what did you think about the way her story ended?
Well, she became a teacher and she told the little boy that just the things that she had learned, that he could be and make choices and he could become something.
I think they wrapped it up nicely in terms of, she kept saying she wanted to survive, that it was her story and she had to make peace with it. Now, we all know from working with our kids that that story does not always end that way. In fact, it very often doesn't end that way. So I think that the people that put this together, as I said, they put these two videos together for foster parents to kind of explain that these are the things that don't have to happen this way, but they do. So anyway, I wanted you to see the end of that because it really does wrap a whole lot of stuff in a story that goes on in our child welfare system. The removal, the neglect and the domestic violence and the alcoholism that leads to the removal, the generational abuse of people carrying on into their generation with their own children, the difficulties of the foster care system, the reactions that children have, their kids being placed in these situations and trying to figure it out. She obviously had a pretty bad foster care experience with her first foster home, was placed in a second foster home, was beginning to feel like it was going okay, and then her brother is taken away from her. So in the end, it's a story of survival, but it's also a story of our system, and that's really why I wanted you to see it. And let me go back to share. I also realized that I probably now will not be able to put this, I won't be able to put it on the YouTube channel because this is copyrighted material and I forgot to stop the recording, so I'll try it, but it'll probably get a tag. I tried to put one up last week that was just from a news article about interracial domestic adoption, and that got flagged and it wouldn't let me put the whole thing up, so. I'm not going to go over these for the 40th time. We've done them, we've talked about them. But these honestly, when you open your cases, these are the issues you're going to be working with in some way or another. Adoption is all about loss. It's all about grieving that loss. And because we as adoptive children have lost something, we haven't learned how to attach. So we've kind of got that three-pronged thing that we got going on here. We're dealing with loss, we're dealing with grief, and we're helping this family to learn how to get past that and trust each other and learn how to attach and become a blended family. I'd like to say it's easy. It isn't easy, but it's absolutely doable. We have lots and lots of adoptive parents who do very, very well. But they will all willingly say that they need help. And that's why we're here. And that's why we focus so much on our adoptive families. And I'm going to show you this. This really just is Amy kind of wrapping up what we're doing and why we're doing it.
Hi, I'm Amy Iannatelli, Executive Director at Circle of Friends Services. Circle of Friends is a not-for-profit community mental health agency that provides outpatient counseling to children and families and child welfare. In recent years, we've really become specialists in providing post-adoption services. And what I'd like to talk to you about today is what that process looks like and what to expect from counseling and therapy in the adoption process. So the first issue I'd like to talk about is what kinds of issues will we be helping you and your family to deal with. In adoption, many adoption families experience similar issues. These issues does not mean that your adoption is failing, does not mean that you've done anything wrong. This is just what's to be expected from the adoption experience. Many of these issues include grief and loss. Children who have been removed from their biological parents and placed into foster care or other types of placement and are now being adopted have experienced numerous losses. And grief and loss is something that they need help to process and to be able to express. Another issue is trust and attachment. They are now forming a new relationship with you and you with them. So working on these relationship issues and learning to bond and learning to form this relationship is something that we can help your family with. The next issue is identity formation. A child, really no matter what their age, particularly if they are older though, is going to be forming a new identity. They're going to take part of their old identity and integrating that into your family and helping to be inclusive of everything that they are. Families need help with this. It is hard to know how to respond to their past memories, their biological parents, and to be accepting and understanding of all that they are and all that they've experienced. And they're going to be learning about you and experiencing, what your family is like, creating new traditions and new routines and those types of issues that we can really help with. Again, these are all very normal and we can help with this process. So how do we help? I'd like to talk a little bit about what to expect, maybe from the first session and ongoing sessions. I think a lot of families, when they think about counseling, they think about maybe the child going in and seeing the therapist, talking with them for an hour and then coming back out. Adoption therapy is quite different. Adoption therapy is about engaging the entire family. So family therapy is the primary service. What this looks like, we provide in-home counseling and we also provide in-school counseling. However, in school is probably not going to be very effective for any adoption-related issues because it's missing one really important piece, and that is you as parents. So adoption-related needs to happen in the home with the entire family, or at least the parents and the kids together. Some of what we can do during this time is we can provide guidance on parenting. We can provide support if expectations are not being met on either side. And most importantly, we can provide a lot of support and education on how to respond to your kids' trauma. They have experienced lots of trauma, and that can look very different for lots of kids. It can mean that kids are acting up, that they're not able to self-regulate, that they're having difficulty with attachment. And the response of the caregiver is really the change, what will help heal this child and heal the family. So we're going to help guide you and give you the support on this really difficult issue. And we will be there for you every week. And this brings me to my next point, is that consistency is super, super important. Now, every family is different. Some families will not need lots of services and lots of counseling. They might need only services for a short time, maybe only several months, and things are going well. Other families are struggling a little bit more and will need services much longer, maybe even over a year. Some families might also experience difficulties or need services at different times in the adoption process. Maybe they've adopted as the child as an infant, and now later they're experiencing some difficulty at a certain milestone or at pre-adolescence. But either way, this is to be expected, and whatever you experience for your family is normal. So try not to judge yourself compared to other families. This is just what your family needs. And as therapists, we want to partner with you, and we want to help you to make these decisions. I'm a licensed mental health counselor, and I've worked with lots of families in the adoption related process. Some who have just adopted the children, some who have had the adoption for several years. And I will say that, the one thing that they do have in common is that grief and loss and trauma does impact families. And the most important thing that the families can do is that the parents are the agents of change. The parents' relationship with their kids is what is going to heal them. And as a therapist, I would like to partner with you to help you to heal your kids and to make this adoption successful and beneficial for everybody. There's lots of ways that therapists do this. Therapists have different approaches. At Circle of Friends, we really try to focus on building activities, building experiences that will, such as planning a meal together, or having a play date, or going somewhere where you are doing this together as a family. This will encourage bonding and attachment, trust and acceptance. And then we're going to help you to process these experiences, talk about what your needs are with one another. But most importantly, it's an experience. So I'd like to encourage you to, partner with your therapist, talk about what your needs are, and just know that all of this is very, very normal. And we look forward to working with you and helping you. So this is part of our adoption series. If you'd like to hear more about adoption-related issues and how we can help, please check out our Circle of Friends YouTube channel. Thanks.
I'll spare you the dramatic ending. When we first started doing these, our beginnings and our endings were very dramatic, and we've kind of gotten past that now. I also, when Amy is a friend of mine, and she was with me for 9 years and did a lot of this work with me. So I always honor her when I show her videos. But if you can always see, all of us, when we're doing these things, are looking down, because the way we filmed them is that we put a television screen right in front of us on the floor that had all the talking points, so that we could keep looking down and seeing what we had to say next. So that's why you see us all looking down so much. But the theme that you're going to hear me saying, and you heard Amy saying over and over again, is this is normal. Why do you think we keep saying this is normal? What is the message that you think the therapists are trying to give these families?
Hope.
What was that?
I think she said hope.
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
Oh.
It's the guys next door working on the air conditioner. Yes, absolutely. Charmaine is right. We're trying to give them hope. We're trying to, because you have to remember that by the time families call people like Circle of Friends, they're experiencing difficulties, and they're feeling like maybe something is really, really wrong with their adoption, which is why we always say over and over, there's nothing wrong with your adoption. There's nothing wrong with your family. There's nothing wrong with this child or you. It's kind of a normative process. And we use that word a lot when we are working with families, because people get discouraged. I mean, people, and you also heard Amy say, don't compare yourself to other families. We all do that. I mean, if we have children, if you have a 12-year-old boy and your friend has a 12-year-old boy, aren't you looking to see, he's doing this, is my child doing that? Adoptive families do the same thing. They try to look at other families and say, well, they look fine. Why are we experiencing these difficulties? So the message that you all have to give as therapists, as GALs, working with people, that it's okay. It's going to get better. I am going, my air conditioning guy is here. I'm going to give you guys a 10-minute break so that I can go check in with him, and then we'll be back to this.
Okay.
Okay. Since I don't want the time to run out and we don't have any time to have any discussion about how this has been for you, could I ask each one of you to just tell me a little bit about, did you think this is what this was going to be? Has it been helpful? Has it not been helpful? And anything that you'd like, that you think I need to add to this? My criticism of the original training, number one, it had no attachment in it at all. And it jumped all over the place. It would go from one thing to the next to the next. If I showed you the original slides, which I kept, I couldn't make any sense out of, I like a training to have a linear purpose. I like you guys to come in and have a beginning, a middle, and an end, and get out thinking that's what we talked about. But I've had to, over 10 years, really, really work on this. And every time I do it, I pull up the slides and go, oh, I'm getting rid of that slide. I don't like that slide. And I don't care who goes first or who says what, and I don't care what you say. If there are things that you did not find helpful about this, that's entirely okay. I just would like to hear from each one of you.
Well, I guess I'll go first since no one's volunteering.
I was waiting for you, Charmaine.
Yeah, well, GALs are the ultimate volunteers, aren't they? Go ahead, Charmaine.
Okay, well, I was, there is so much good material in here. And I've just taken on 2 new adoption cases. And even though I can't be the therapist, I do have a degree in that, but I can't be the therapist, but I can help whoever's the caregiver at that time, or maybe even the adoptive parents, just to understand a little bit more about the loss and the grief that the children are experiencing. Definitely the loss of siblings, that's a big one. But I just think that it will help to explain to my caregivers why the child is acting the way they are.
Right,
And that
Mhm.
it's normal and it's nothing about them. We can use that just in regular caregivers, where they're grandparents or whoever they are.
for
For us
sure.
being item volunteers. But that's what I really enjoyed, is I just didn't think about some of those things.
Right.
Yeah, they miss their parents, but they're doing great one day and the next day they're acting out. So it just gave me so much more insight, and I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, I am glad to hear that because when Sandy Chuba first asked me about bringing the GALs in, and I said, sure, because I know you guys don't seem to have any kind of a training budget over there. And I've known Sandy for years, and she said, how about we do this? And I thought, well, maybe once in a while, a few of you show up. Well, you guys do show up, and you show up a lot. And I like that. I like the fact that you want to kind of join with us in the work that we're doing. I don't think I'd be speaking out of turn to say that that doesn't always happen in all counties. So,
Yes.
so we appreciate you coming and becoming a part of us and becoming a part of the work that we do, because if we're all on the same page, it makes life a whole lot better.
Yeah, I agree definitely what Charmaine was saying. It's very interesting to see it happen in real life. Like, the kids acting out when they're removed from their homes, and then like also learning about it in this training. And I was like a bit like nervous when I first joined the training, because like this is what I thought we were going to be discussing, like the different topics that we've talked about, but I was nervous because I was like, I read the title like one day and I was like, wait, like is this like supposed to be like just for like the foster parents? Like is this like something that like training that you do like if you're planning on to adopt? And I got like confused, but it turned out to be exactly what I was expecting, just that overall understanding of, what that process looks like of adopting, or like, removing kids from their homes. And yeah, I liked hearing from the actual adoptive parents. Like I thought that stuck with me the most.
Yeah,
Uh,
I love watching those people because they
yeah.
figured it out. I mean, they didn't put their failures on that DVD, they put their successes on there. So, Ashley, your feedback is interesting to me because, when we live in the child welfare world, child welfare has a lingo, and adoption competency is part of our lingo. But I also realize that not probably everybody knows what that means. So
Yeah.
it gives me probably a good idea to maybe adjust the title a little, so we make it clear who it's for and what it's all about. Uh, I'm very used to the language of child welfare. And
Right.
somebody asked me the other day, actually it was last Friday, somebody called me from the development department at Florida United Methodist and just said to me, what does permanency mean? And I didn't quite understand the question. And I said, well, permanency means that we're trying to either get kids reunified or placed for adoption. And it apparently he was trying to write an article for a newsletter, and I must have given him a child welfare answer that he didn't understand at all. So once I figured out what he was really trying to ask me, that in our world, we're trying to get kids to permanency. And we have basically kind of two choices in child welfare. We can either get them home or we can get them into adoption. We don't want them lingering in foster care forever. So um, our lingo probably needs to be explained to people sometimes. And maybe the title, if it confused you, it may confuse other people. So thank you for that.
Yes, I definitely agree because when we first started, I didn't really know what that was. I had to ask someone because I wasn't familiar of what the adoption competency, or any of that was before we started our whole training process. So if you're not familiar with it, the language can be a little confusing. But once you know it and understand it, it becomes, more like second nature.
Well, I know, because I do remember Shantaria is fairly new to us, and she called and said, what is this, and do I have to come? And so I was glad that you did call and ask the question, but, and it is good feedback from me too, because we need to explain to our therapists coming in that this is why this is so important for you to jump on the very first training that you can. We usually ask our new therapists to join the training, the first training that they can. And I do it about twice a year. So usually within 6 months, you can get to one of these trainings. But it's important because I want you to have the framework for what you're doing. You'll be doing other things when you work for us. You might be doing sexual trauma work. You might be working with kids under 5. You might have different focuses, but with adoption, it's pretty clear that what you're doing is trying to get these families to understand the quotes normative crises that they're going to go through and dealing with the loss and figuring out how to attach. So, but I do remember when you made the call, Shantaria, because Angie told me about it. So, any other reactions, Shantaria? You've been very quiet through this whole thing.
Yes, I've just been listening, because a lot of it was fairly new to me. I've just been trying to listen and take it all in. It was interesting to hear the foster carers, the parents' point of views and the caregivers, because you don't really hear that a lot. And I did like the videos that we were able to watch to see how kind of see how the children will interact and how their reactions are to a lot of the things too, so you can know how to deal with them when they do come. So it was just an interesting training. I haven't seen a lot of it before because I'm used to working with adults rather than children.
Okay. Well, good. Then I'm glad that you did join us. Like I said, we do it twice a year, and then we put together the refresher course. We actually have 2 or 3 trainings around this. We have the refresher course that Charmaine's talking about. I have, and they're all kind of similar. I have to watch it because some of the slides slide into from one presentation to the next. But there's one that we do called Helping Families in the Critical Post-Adoption Period, which is the early months of working with families so that they don't reach that stage of disappointment. They don't reach that stage where they're thinking, maybe this wasn't the best thing for me to do. We don't ever want families to get to that stage without help. So, but we've developed a lot around this, and most of our therapists end up being very good at it. And that's really what we want. So, and let's not forget Rebecca, because she's behind me.
Yeah, I kind of felt the same, like I was like adoption competency. Okay, I don't really know what to expect. But it was really good. I really like talking about the attachment and trauma. I did work in child welfare at my last job, so I've worked with a lot of that, and I feel like you always have the experience. No matter what, I'm always learning new things, and I'm always like, wow, I wish I would have known that when I was working with this client, or like thought of that. But so it's a good refresher, but then good new information as well. I don't have any who are being adopted right now, but I have some clients that in foster care and who've been removed, and I definitely picked up a few specific things to do with them, which I found really helpful. And just last week I told you after, but it was really helpful. I've always been in sort of a more structured environment, and the contracting is hard for me because I'm like, am I doing it right? Like, I want to make sure that I'm
Yeah.
doing everything I'm supposed to. And it was just helpful last week to sort of hear like, these kids just need the time to process and be there and play and build that trust. And I don't have to be making sure that like, you know,
You're not gonna be doing
yeah.
great stuff every minute. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I was putting pressure on myself to do that, and it helped. Yeah, it helped to have that. So that was nice as well.
Yeah, the takeaway that I get from what Rebecca said is that when therapists come into this job new, or when you're new to your GAL position or whatever, you will hear foster parents say to you, all you do is play with them. And foster parents really just want change. They want you to come in, they want these kids to straighten up and fly right. And I can't hate them for that. They usually have a house full of kids, and they're wanting a little piece. But the reason that we try to train our therapists to do the expressive therapies, to do the play therapy, to take the time with the kids, is that a safe, calm child will go way farther in a session than a dysregulated kid that's upset and worrying and whatever else is going on. And my rule of thumb is that if you get 10 good minutes out of a kid in a play therapy session, you have done your job. Because think about your 50-minute hour, or whatever you want to say. So you have a 10 o'clock, and the kid comes in and he's all wired, and he's nervous, and he's upset. Something happened down the way here. He's upset about something that happened in school. So you're going to spend a good 15 minutes just kind of, let's do some yoga, let's sing a song, let's try to do other things. And then maybe you can slide into a little bit of play work for 15 minutes, but then you got to send that kid back to geography. So you have to be able to then have that kid put back together again. So as therapists, don't put a lot of pressure on yourself. If you can make your kids feel safe and regulated, and feel like they have some kind of connection to you, then you're doing a very good job. So that would be my stump speech for today. So, and I am going to skip through some of this. We're not going to do everything in this PowerPoint, although I realize I never sent you guys the PowerPoint, did I? Sorry.
I realized that this morning too.
I can send it out to you afterwards if you want to keep it. Part of it, this one has so many video clips in it that I have to stop and take them all out before I can send them to you, because they get too big to send. So and again, here we are with our loss wheel. We always are going to be looking at loss. And I don't know which one of, I think two of you said it, but kids are reacting to that loss, and they're always going to be reacting to that loss, even if you get them calmed down and happy. And the adoption is working. You are going to find that kids are always going to be reacting to it, and maybe at different stages along the way. I mean, we talked last week about those normative crises that come up. They come up for all of us. If you've lost a parent, and it's your high school graduation, or your prom, or your homecoming, or your marriage, or the death of, or the birth of your first child, whatever it may be, you're going to be thinking, I wonder what my mother would be thinking about this. Well, it's no different for adoption. It truly isn't. And again, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. I am going to say, once again, I'm going to put a pitch in here. If you don't know anything about infertility, if you don't know how it affects couples, just do a little bit of reading about it. You don't have to become a doctoral student on infertility, or maybe you know somebody that has gone through it. It breaks up a lot of marriages, and it's a real, think about it. We're supposed to be procreating, aren't we? That's part of our job when we get married, is that we're supposed to be having babies. And then if you can't, it's a big loss. So, and I'm going to move through these. This is a Nightline special, and it is interesting because, again, I can't stress enough that the grieving of the loss of a parent lasts a lifetime. And this guy is in his 50s, and he was abandoned as a baby, and has obviously gone on to have a very stable, happy life, a very strong support system around him, and yet he really wanted to know where he came from. And I find that the videos are better than me talking to you for an hour, because it just really, this guy is going to tell his story better than I can.
A 5 decades old family secret began in this alleyway. A newborn baby abandoned atop a pile of trash.
It's kind of hard to imagine.
That infant, today a grown man.
Already nervous and I'm drinking more coffee.
His lifelong mystery about to be solved.
I'm good to go.
By this woman, a renowned investigative genealogist who's discovered who left him there and why.
I have a lot of information to give them.
Hi, Mom.
Pam Slayton's reunited dozens of adoptees with their long-lost birth parents. By harnessing the power of genetic science,
DNA does not lie.
and good old-fashioned detective work.
Do you happen to know the people that live here? I like to fight for the underdog. This agony of not knowing your answers, it's over.
3 years earlier, Pam, an ABC News consultant and author of Reunited, was actually working on another case about a kidnapped baby in Chicago when she discovered this article from 1964.
I mean, this immediately grabbed my attention. The child was found in a cardboard box wrapped with a cotton curtain early Sunday morning. As soon as I read that article, I immediately dove in to try and figure out who that baby in the alleyway was.
His name, Bill Gillespie. He's the patriarch of this tight-knit family living in the suburbs of Chicago, the orphan for whom family means everything.
I can't imagine a day without my family or being away from them.
When Bill was just 4 months old, he was adopted by a loving older couple.
Do you remember the first time you realized what being adopted meant?
Probably 5 or 6. My parents were kind of tried to explain it to me. And the way they put it is, we picked you. We came and we found you and we picked you.
He grew up celebrating adoption days along with his birthdays.
These are clearly scenes from a happy childhood.
Yes. Oh, yeah. They were good people.
He waited until after his adoptive parents passed away to ask a few soul-searching questions.
The older I get, the more I want to find out. I just want answers.
One of his first steps, reaching out to his adoption agency, Catholic Charities, but he was unprepared for what they wrote back.
We really have very little information to share. We never met your birth parents, as you came under our guardianship as a foundling.
Foundling. It was the first time Bill had even heard the word, a term for children literally found abandoned in the street.
Kind of takes your breath away. Your jaw kind of drops. You're like, what? You know?
What's it like to have your hopes dashed?
It's loss, it's anger, it's just, you know, you kind of feel like, well, why can't I find my family?
For the next 2 decades, Bill was an on-again, off-again searcher.
Bill was always half in his search and half out. He was just trying to preserve himself from being hurt.
At one point, he even tried his luck on internet adoption boards.
It's kind of daunting how many families are looking for people on there.
Feels like a needle in a haystack.
It is definitely a needle in a haystack.
That's when he got a fateful phone call from Pam Slayton.
He was really shy when him and I first spoke, but there was something good that drew me into him.
She takes on his case pro bono, eventually sharing her first clue, that 1964 article pinpointing the alleyway he was left in.
Turn left on North Lotus Avenue.
The details so haunting, he had to go see for himself.
It's kind of hard to imagine.
Ironically, the alleyway just an hour drive from where Bill's raising his own family.
Go ahead.
His youngest daughter, Morgan, is there to support him, retracing what he believes were his birth mother's footsteps.
Right here.
Yeah, my alleyway. It's just off the street.
Yeah, like you can walk past and see it. That's picturing. wonder if she lived over here.
For years, Bill was troubled by the idea that any parent could abandon their newborn only hours old.
I was mad for a long time.
But now, standing here, he feels something different.
Kind of feel bad for my mom, you know, my birth mother, but then again, you're still placed in an alleyway, so I guess you don't really know how to take it.
After he was found, the police brought him to this orphanage. Today, the building houses Catholic Charities, which still maintains the old adoption records.
I'm a little nervous, apprehensive.
Just want to make sure he has someone here and don't want to be by himself.
Oh, boy.
Feeling all right?
Okay. Blood pressure going. Hi, how are you doing?
Lisa Francis.
One of the caseworkers has agreed to share anything that might shed light on his past.
You know, just different shots of, when the babies were brought in.
The orphanage had been run by nuns.
It's funny, I see a lot of police officers bringing babies in.
It was known that the police would come straight here to St. Vincent's and bring the baby to safety and eventually a loving home.
Yeah.
So, still opens up.
Lisa shows him this tiny alcove where, as a newborn, he took part in something sacred.
It was a working baptismal back,
Yeah.
which is most important.
It was here that Bill was baptized.
Feel
Could I-
free, feel
could I-
free. You were loved
Yeah.
when you were here from the minute you were brought in.
They say orphanage and you automatically have this bad image. This is a little bit nicer. Definitely much better than I had anticipated.
Each of them are holding child.
You know. Yeah. It's funny, but it is a little easier. I just feel relieved. Thank you.
A comforting moment, and yet Bill's no closer to finding his birth family. That is, until now.
You feeling all right?
Pam Slayton has just made another major break in his case. Months earlier, she had had Bill take an Ancestry.com DNA test.
DNA has completely changed everything that I used to know how to do in terms of searching.
Bill's DNA test uncovers relatives on both sides of his biological family.
Bill ended up with a close family match, and he ended up with a first cousin.
And after digging through public records,
Up comes a Cook County, Illinois marriage index.
it's the linchpin that links the two sides of his biological family.
You're getting butterflies just thinking about it, aren't
Yeah.
I can see it in your face.
Yeah. Anxious, very anxious.
Today's the day.
I had crazy things going through my mind last night.
Pam is on her way to Bill's house to meet with him in person for the first time and deliver the news.
The support system.
My crazy support system.
Okay, here we are.
Are you worried you might be opening skeletons in the closet?
Yes, very, yeah.
Here.
Hi, come on in. Come on. I'm glad to finally meet you.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm good.
His family fully supported him. There was so much love between them. You had stellar DNA.
Pam shares a stunning revelation.
It hits me like a ton of bricks. Your birth mother married your birth father.
Wow.
Despite what he'd always believed, Bill wasn't born to a young unwed mother.
I got,
Hey, wow,
I have
you're kidding me.
here it is. Here's the marriage record.
Cook County.
Now comes the not great part.
Okay,
All right, your birth mom did pass.
I know, I just know, I don't know how I know, I just know.
And unfortunately, your birth father also passed.
Okay,
His dreams about meeting his birth parents dashed forever. But there's still hope for a reunion. Turns out his birth mother had remarried, and there's a surviving half-brother.
He does not live far from here.
okay.
So I'd like to call him.
You know about Bill?
Nobody knows anything. I have not called anybody.
Hands trembling, Bill dials the number.
Let's try this.
The moment that phone call is placed, it's out of your hands. And hope for the best.
When we come back, Bill's search takes a jaw-dropping turn
I silently was panicking.
and a reunion. 5 decades in the making.
I'll pass out. Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks.
Unfortunately, part 2 of that I cannot find anymore. I had part 2 of this. However, I will tell you what happened was that she was able to determine that he had a half brother from the mother had gotten married again. And as you see him at the end, he's going across the street. The half brother's family is coming to meet him, and they reunite. It's a very positive thing for him and for the half brother. And the half brother had a little bit more knowledge of the mother, and she was older when she gave birth to Bill. She was in an abusive relationship. She was afraid that the baby was going to be abused, and that was her stated reason for, however ill-guided the decision, that was her stated reason for leaving him in the alley. So the ending to that story is that even though he didn't ever actually meet his biological parents, he did have a sense of closure and of peace, because of course you would always wonder why your mother would leave you in a cardboard box in the middle of an alley. And it may not be a great reason, but it gave him some peace. So I guess that the point of any of these stories is that they don't go away. The longing doesn't go away. The wish that you could find and get some answers doesn't go away. We have come a tremendously long way in terms of adoption. When I think I have shared with you that when I first started doing this, it was in the 70s at Catholic Charities and in upstate New York. And we did change the identity. I had a box of index cards on my desk. It was a long time ago. And we had the names and the details of the babies on the index cards. But we changed their names so that cross-referencing them, if a biological mother came to Catholic Charities 20 years later and said, I just need to know what happened to my baby, that was not going to happen. Over time, states began to pass laws saying that if the biological parent wants to register and say that her or his information can be given to the child when the child reaches a certain age, that can happen. Excuse me, that's where we get the reunion registries. I think I mentioned the reunion registry that we have here in Orlando, where you can register as an adoptee, or you can register as a biological parent and have your information made accessible should somebody come in. It's a far better solution than the way we did it in the past. It left a lot of people with unresolved stories, and I'm not sure what the thought process was when we decided to hide things from people. We didn't have 23andMe. We didn't have the, what's the other one? 23.
Ancestry?
What is it?
Ancestry? Is that-
The ancestry.com. We didn't have those things. I think my personal opinion is that they are wonderful services, because there's very little good that comes out of just having to go through your life not knowing what's happened to your child, or go through your life not knowing what's happened to your parents. So, and again, when we talk about identity being a difficulty, one of the things that we try to tell our adoptive parents is about the name changing. Don't change their name unless they want their name changed. And sometimes it takes kids a while before they're willing to allow a name change, especially if they're older. We've had a lot of kids who have wanted to change their name because they really they thought it was a part of identity, and they wanted to be a Smith or an Allen or whatever the name of the family is. And there are some kids who are so conflicted about the the mother that they left behind in their mind, that they don't want to give up that identity. So uh, there's a lot that we as therapists in our work at Circle of Friends try to help our families understand. The reason I showed you Amy's video is that Amy was able to kind of lay it out that this is what you can expect if you hire us, so to speak, to be your adoption therapist. This is what we're going to try to help you do, and this is why. It helps a lot more if you know the why of what we're doing. It's like anything else that you do, you need to know the why. So, like I said, I'm going to move through some of this now. We saw Lion, did we not? Didn't I show you Lion in another one of our? I thought we did. There's so many things. Hollywood has really done up yearning and loss and adoption pretty darn good. Some of it is good, some of it isn't. I had The Blind Side in. I had the trailer from The Blind Side in this module. And then after all of that hullabaloo with Michael Orr saying that the Tuohys didn't adopt him and they didn't give him money, and I just took it out. I figured it would be better to not muddy the water with something that had nothing to do with what we were trying to teach you. And that got some crazy reactions too. Sandra Bullock was asked to give back her Oscar. She was, what did Sandra Bullock have to do with any of this? She was an actress in a role. So, but I just took it out of there because it just seemed to confuse what we were talking about. But Lion, if you remember Lion, he was 30 when he began to look for his adoptive parents. The Blind Side, well, that's another issue, but we're going to talk a little bit about Philomena. Philomena was a very interesting movie. Judi Dench played Philomena. It's a true story. The real Philomena, she may have passed away at this point. She was living in England when this movie was filmed, and I think this movie was probably filmed maybe 15 years ago. But it kind of tells the story on the other side of the biological mother never being able to come to peace with the loss of her child. And we'll skip past Lion because we've done Lion. If any of you have not seen this movie, I'm going to show you the trailer to this movie. The trailer to this movie makes this look like a comedy. It is not a comedy. It is a very, very touching story of an Irish woman who she lost her child. Her child was taken from her by the nuns. God bless the nuns. I'm an Irish Catholic, but we have to go through this every once in a while with things that happened in Ireland. And in Ireland, well, actually, I think the last Magdalene Laundry didn't close until the 90s, but there was something in Ireland called the Magdalene Laundries. And if a girl became pregnant, it was a restrictive culture, and many families sent their pregnant girls to something called the Magdalene Laundries. And they gave birth to their children there, and they worked in the laundries, supposedly to pay the convent back for taking care of the child. But a lot of these children were adopted against the will of the parents. So in this case, Anthony was 4 when he was removed. So she had spent quite a bit of time with him. He was 4 years old. And she spent 50 years trying to find him. But I'm going to show you the trailer and then we'll just talk about it a little bit.
They said that you had abandoned him as a baby. I did not abandon my child. You're 50 today.
Your wife tells me you think you're mildly depressed. Well, I got the sack. I'm unemployed. Yes, it wasn't your fault, was it? That's why I'm depressed.
Martin Dicksmith used to be the BBC's man in Moscow, became a spin doctor for the government, and it all went a bit tits up.
I always say, if you shovel shit for long enough, eventually you're going to get some on your shoes.
Yes, you got it on your head. How do you manage that?
I know this woman. She had a baby when she was a teenager, and she's kept it secret for 50 years.
And what you're talking about would be what they call a human interest story. I don't do those.
Why not?
You think I should do a human interest story? Hello, you must be Philomena.
What they did to you with evil. I didn't like that word.
Evil's good. Sorry, why
Still, if it'd be possible not to use my real name when you write the story, what about Anne? Anne Boleyn. It's a lovely name. I would somebody had that.
Yeah, we're gonna have to use your real name, Philomena.
I'd feel more comfortable if I could speak to Philomena. You're a journalist.
Well, I used to be.
She's a road.
Well, no, I used to be. There are avenues we can pursue in America.
Getting a royal treatment, Marshal. I feel like the Pope. Champagne or box first?
It's free.
Oh, I see. Going to pay for everything on Ryanair. Look at the view.
Wow.
I want to know if he's all right. What if he died in Vietnam? What if he was obese?
That makes you think you'd be obese.
Because these are the portions.
And that's him. At the White
Do
House.
you remember anything he said?
Hello.
Hello. Hello.
Must have been hi.
Oh, Martin. I just want to talk to you about my son. He was taken from me. And I've been looking for him ever since.
Why would God bestow upon us a sexual desire that he then wants us to resist?
The thing is, I didn't even know I had a clitoris, Martin.
Right.
That's what I mean. They make it sound like it was a comedy. It really was not. Philomena spent 50 years in a time when we didn't have Google and we didn't have all the stuff we have now trying to find him. But the nuns had adopted him against her will to an American couple. And they brought him from Ireland to America, raised him. It turned out, in retrospect, not to have been a very good adoption, but he became an attorney and he worked in the Reagan White House. Um, eh, the Steve Coogan plays the reporter who helped her, and I don't really know I can't remember what his actual name was, but he did find her son. He had changed his name to Michael, and he was able to track him down. Unfortunately, by the time he tracked him down, he had died of AIDS. Because if you remember, the 80s was when the AIDS first hit the country. And it was a death sentence. If you got AIDS, you were going to die. So he was in a gay relationship. He developed AIDS, but he went back to Ireland because he knew the convent that he had been adopted out of. And he tried to find his mother at the convent. And the nuns lied to him and told him that they didn't know where she was. And she kept going back to the convent and they kept lying to her. So at the very end of the movie, she finds his grave because he asked to be buried in the convent in the hopes that she would someday find his grave there, and she did. So the real Philomena was, she was brought here for the filming of the movie, and she was asked to kind of critique how the movie was going. And she said that there was a kind of a brief scene where she sees that they're taking him and they put him in the car and he's looking out the back of the car, and that's the last time she saw him. And the real Philomena said that's exactly the way that happened. So it's, again, I keep hammering you guys about this, but this just doesn't end. It's a lifelong thing that you have to go through, and it's lifelong for biological parents. We don't talk a lot about the pain of biological parents in this training, but it's there. And for many, many people who lose their parental rights, now we all know, because we are therapists and GALs here, we know that we work with a lot of people who lose their parental rights over and over and over again. There are also people who lose their parental rights and try to rehabilitate and try not to ever have that happen again. But the fact that they have lost their children stays with them forever. So nobody wakes up in the morning and says, I think I'll lose my kids today. So, but I did want you to see that. Everybody, when I used to do this with The Blind Side, everybody had seen The Blind Side. The Blind Side was one of those feel-good movies. I think it came out in 2007 and it won an Academy Award, and she won an Academy Award. And it was really one of those feel-good stories that nobody wanted to hear from Michael Orr 2 years ago, when he suddenly decided that he was going to say that these people had not done the things that they said they had done. So I don't know how that story ended. I do know how this story ended, and the last time I looked, the real Philomena was still alive. She's quite elderly now, and she may have passed away since then. And I'm going to move ahead a little bit because I want to get to treatment. Let's just look at this when we talk about positive adoption language. If you want to call this positive adoption language or politically correct language, there are certain things that we have kind of learned to not say in our field. We don't refer to the biological parents as the real parents because the real parent is the parent who has the child. Now I can tell you, because one learns way more from one's mistakes than we learn from our successes, that one of the first jobs I had at Catholic Charities, I worked with the birth mothers and I worked with the adoptive parents. And I was at visiting, and we had placed a baby, and I was at the home of the adoptive parents, and we were sitting in the kitchen, and she was making coffee, and the baby was in the high chair, and everything was grand until I, in my 20-year-old stupidity, said, well, her real mother did such and such and such. And this woman completely took my head off with all justification and said, I'm her real mother. Well, I never made that mistake again. And I never forgot that I made that mistake. So we learn to be careful about our language when we're working with adoptive families. We don't refer to the adoption plan as surrendering anymore, because it does have sort of a negative connotation. When we talk about that maybe the child had an adoption plan made for them, it doesn't it isn't any less difficult than saying that the parents relinquished the rights, gave up the rights, surrendered the rights. It's just a little softer to say that this child had an adoption plan made for him. We try to tell adoptive parents not to always refer to, this is my and they do this all the time, this is my biological daughter and this is my adoptive daughter. We try to say, don't do that, because it just sets people apart. And we certainly have had people do that. One of the first families that I worked with, they were a little bit older and they had adopted, I think they had adopted 6 kids, but between the two of them, they had 5 adult children. It was a second marriage. He had 3, she had 2. They put them together, they got married, the kids grew up, and then they adopted several more. But they were wonderful about saying, these are all our kids. They didn't differentiate between the husband's children and the wife's children and the adoptive children. It is really important to just own those kids. I think Ashley or somebody said they liked watching the videos of the parents, the adoptive parents, and the one couple where she did all the talking and he barely said a thing. She kept talking about how they were all her children, and another one said we did adopt this child, but he's no different than my biological child. We love them the same. We learned how to love them. We didn't think we were going to be able to, but we did. So just keep in mind some of the language when you're talking to your adoptive families. We talk about waiting children now. We in child welfare, and again, we've got our vocabulary, and our vocabulary is that some kids are hard to place. And we've really tried to get away from that, to say this child is waiting. This child has special needs, but this child is waiting to be adopted. We know that some children are more difficult to place than others, but we just really, if you kind of just look at this little chart, all it really does is to try to put a positive spin on something that's a difficult situation. And sometimes it just makes all the difference in the world to your adoptive parents when you're talking to them. Especially in the situation that we talked about with the domestic transracial adoptions. We had a family that we were dealing with, and it was a white family. They had adopted a Black child, and he was older, and they would come to meetings or support group meetings or whatever, and they always referred to him as their adopted child. And at one point, the father said during the support group that my son finally said to me, "Dad, I'm black and you're white. I think they get it. I don't think you have to keep saying I'm your adoptive kid." And the father did get it and stopped doing it. So it's just a positive language. Just be kind of aware of it. Now, we went over a little bit of this before, but we're just gonna talk again. We talked about life books. Life books are really good to do with your kids. I showed you the Family Shield. I want you to have some good tools to come away with this. If you go on our YouTube channel, one of the playlists is interventions, and you can learn how to do the pictorial timeline. You can learn how to do the Family Shield. You can learn how to do critter genograms. I'm going to show you one of those in a minute. You don't have to make it up. It's all there. If you want to learn how to do something, just use that YouTube channel. That's why we put it together. These are some, actually, these are all left over from the Rutgers. I left them in here because they have some kind of good ideas. But most of these things are different versions of genograms. And with genograms, what is important with all of these pictorial representations, and let me show you another one. Oops, that's not it. Well, maybe I took them out. What we do with the genograms is just always acknowledge that there are roots and there are branches, and your biological parents were your roots and your adoptive family are your branches. And however you want to do that, if you want to do it in a regular genogram, the old-fashioned genogram where you do the line and you put the people under that were the roots and you put the people over that were the branches. However you want to do it, it just helps kids to see that they came from something and that they're going to something, and however you want to do that. This one to me looks upside down because the birth people are on the top and the adopted people are on the bottom. But I think whoever did this genogram just wanted to show that there are two sides to this child's family. And this is my famous critter genogram. When I was doing this adoption training, probably years ago, one of the therapists we were all together in the room at that point, and it was before the pandemic, and everybody was here, and she said, I have a picture of something that I did in a session last night, and I'm going to show it to you. So she went to the car, she got the picture, and we put it up on the screen, and she explained to us what happened. And it was just such a wonderful intervention that I always included in here. And a critter genogram is an easy thing to do. All you have to have is a bag with a bunch of plastic animals and a felt heart. But the story is this, that these are the two children that she was working with. And she said, I started work with this adoptive family. I couldn't figure out what I was doing with them or what the problem was. The adoption just didn't seem to be gelling. And the adoptive parents were wonderful and caring, and they were trying everything they could. And I just couldn't figure out what was wrong. So she did the critter genogram. And this was the two siblings here that were adopted, because they did this and then they told her what it was. These are the adoptive parents over here, these four little people that are hanging out on the edge of the heart. And this, in the mind of these two children, this was their extended family. This was a Hispanic family. These two children were Hispanic, and to be honest with you, it may have just been their memory or what they wanted their memory to be, but in their memory, they lived in a neighborhood where there were people on the street all the time, and everybody knew everybody else. This is the story that they told the therapist, that everybody knew everybody else, and they had block parties, and they were having things in the street, and they played with all of these other children. And these people over here were very quiet. They didn't have a lot of extended family. They were a different culture. But beyond that, is there anything, what does this look like to you?
Chaos.
Yes, it absolutely looked like chaos. And I think that's kind of what it was. I mean, they dumped it on there and said, that this is what we're used to. Now, what did that do for the therapist? That allowed the therapist to figure out, where do I have to go with this? Because remember, when we talk about loss, one of the things that we talk about is losing your culture, losing your family, losing your neighborhood, your pets, kids that you played with, whatever your memory is. It allowed the therapist to then be able to say to this family, and this was the family, this is what I see happening here. That these kids had to grieve the loss of their culture and their family and what their memory of their family was. And the adoptive parents had to acknowledge it and recognize it. It didn't mean that they had to suddenly become chaotic and have a million people in the house. It meant that they had to recognize that those kids were losing their culture. And it was such a simple thing. She said it took her 10 minutes to do it, but it turned the whole adoption therapy around, and it ended up to be successful. So I always learn a lot from my therapists when I do any training. So I will thank Judy McGrath for that. Judy McGrath has now moved to Asheville, Tennessee, and retired. But I always acknowledge her because she's the one who gave me this. We have some other directed play therapy things that we can use. We can have families draw together. We can have, what is that exercise? The boat and the lighthouse and the sea. I don't know, there's several family drawings that you can do. You can do person picking an apple off a tree. You can do the house tree person. You can do a lot of these things with your families together. The adoption grab bag, you can make up pre-printed questions. You can put them in an envelope. Kids can pull them out. Parents can pull them out. If I could see my birth mother, I would. What's the best thing about adoption? What's the worst thing about adoption? What do I miss about my family? If you want to do something like that, make up your own questions. Don't be afraid, because they're thinking it anyway. So best to let the family be able to talk about it. You're trying to give them some way that they can kind of connect. And it's really all about connection. We do family sand trays sometimes. And we had one family that we put them in front of the sand tray, and it was a new adoptive family. And the adoptive mothers, we explained to her what we were going to do, that we were going to build a scene in the sand tray. And she took her finger and kind of drew a line down the middle of the sand tray. So now we got the parents over here and we got the kid over here. So we already knew what some of our issues were going to be. But you can be creative with your therapy. You can do what you want to do. This again was another 11-year-old. This is one of the therapists who brought this into me after we sat through the adoption competency. And he said this was something that she had I think she got this from Theraplay. Is it Theraplay? And you can get worksheets from Theraplay.
Yeah.
I think she got this from Theraplay. But you can get pre-printed worksheets from that. You can download them. I think this is where she got that. But this is me. This was her. Or this was him, actually. He's saying, I live in a mansion. Some of my favorite things are, I think this is soccer. My friends are, and he wrote the name here. But this was the one that we found telling. This is my family. And this was him. This was the mom, this was the sister, this was the brother, and this was him. And that kind of gave the therapist the feeling that this child was kind of feeling very marginalized in this family. It gave her a clue as to this is where I need to go with this, because this child is not feeling connected. Your families will tell you a lot if you don't make them tell you, if you just let them show you. If you let them draw, if you let them do a family sand tray, if you let them do any critter genogram, whatever, they'll tell you a lot. And you don't have to then spend 10 or 12 sessions trying to figure it out. This was Sarah. Sarah was one of our clients. Sarah was 6 years old, and she was adopted by a single mother who then decided she wanted a second adoptive child. And the therapist at the time tried to say to her, I don't think this is a good idea. I don't think Sarah's ready for another adoptive child. But the woman was very strong-willed and she wanted to adopt another child, and she did. And it proved difficult. But what might you notice about this picture? This is Sarah over here. And what might you notice about something that might be a little diagnostic to you?
I was thinking about Sarah covering her mouth like she had no voice.
Yeah, yeah.
Say.
Good call. Yeah, she absolutely felt like she was not being paid attention to. What she was doing was acting up because she didn't want her mother. She hadn't been there long enough to be willing to share another one. So yeah, she did not have a voice. What do you notice about these three?
No, flowers in their
Right.
stomachs.
Right?
Yeah.
This looks like a little family unit. Look, they
Yeah.
all have the same clothes on.
Yeah.
They've all got little flowers
That's the
here,
pattern I see. Yeah.
and Sarah does not. So, this was an interesting situation because the therapist who had this case, really liked this mother, but she recognized that this mother, she was a single mother. She was very strong-willed and she just wanted to do it. And once she did it, then it became very difficult, and Sarah really acted up. Although she did identify herself here, she did write this up here. And she wrote a little arrow saying, this is me. And I'm not happy about any of this, but the therapist had her work cut out for her. She kind of showed her this picture, mom, this picture, and said, we have some work to do here. You know, you made this decision. Okay, you've made the decision. Here we are. These are the consequences of the decision. Now we're going to work on it. So another example of getting a whole lot of information from one picture. I just put these in here because I love these pictures. We had a big playhouse in our other play therapy room, which the play therapy room was very small and the dollhouse was very big. And we had a little girl, I think she was 5, who used to come in every week, and every week she destroyed the dollhouse. And every week, I've got tons of pictures of what she did with this dollhouse. It was just chaos. We had bodies on the floor. I think I got another one in here. No, no. She had come from a it was domestic violence, and she was a really traumatized little girl. And she was really trying to tell the therapist and her adoptive mother that she had not forgotten any of this, that she really needed some help processing the trauma. The funny thing is about these pictures is that the therapist was a fairly new therapist, and she just wasn't 100% getting what the child was trying to tell her. And I kept walking in because she came at the same time every week, and I would come in and after a while, I would come over and take the pictures because every week it was the same. And we finally sat down with the therapist and said, I think this is what is going on. Now, and the GALs will probably support me on this. Sometimes we get kids and we don't know why we have them. We don't have their backgrounds. We don't have the comprehensive behavioral health assessments yet. So we don't know what it is that we're treating. And for the therapists who just get a referral from a case manager and it says child needs counseling, we don't have any information. So we have to look for clues. And when you're working with kids, you look for clues. And this little girl gave us the clues. And then we were able to try to move her. We call this toxic play. When you have kids that are stuck in toxic play, your job as a therapist is to move them into reparative play. And that was what we did with the therapist. We helped her to move this child past the point where she was acting all this out to where she saw solutions. And I put this in here because this is really what a dollhouse looks like when kids don't have trauma. If you think about, well, there's all girls in this training. If you think about what little girls did with their dollhouses, if you had a dollhouse when you were a little girl, what did you do with it? You created order. We had order in our dollhouses. That's what little girls do with dollhouses. So it's why the dollhouses are so diagnostic in our play therapy rooms, because these kids don't create order in the dollhouses. They create anything but order. Thought I had the other one there, but apparently I don't. This dollhouse had a balcony out in the back. You can't see it in this picture, but she also, every week, she would put two adult doll figures out on the balcony laying down. And she was just remembering some pretty difficult domestic violence scenes. So that gave us some good clues. Sand tray, I'm just going to show you a little bit of sand tray. Before the pandemic, when people were coming in for group supervision, we did a lot of sand tray work. And I don't think Rebecca was here when we did a sand tray demonstration. You weren't here then. We had everybody here and we did a sand tray demonstration, and everybody had things that they could put in the sand tray. And everybody sat around the table and they built one sand tray. And it was interesting how quickly they did it. But for those of you who are not familiar with working with sand tray, you can have portable sand trays. We used to make them and sell them here for cost. You can get a Tupperware container and fill it with sand. You can get bags of, and I can help you do this because we used to do it all the time, just bags of different kinds of toys that you need for sand tray. On the YouTube channel, one of the interventions is Amy showing you how to set up a sand tray. And it's a wonderful, wonderful tool. And it doesn't, I mean, any age uses it, but it is a wonderful tool.
I worked with children that had experienced grief for a year and a half, the loss of a parent or grandparent or whatever. And we used sand trays. We had a sand tray there all the time.
That's wonderful.
I had the 3 to 6 year old group, and it was very interesting how they played in them.
Absolutely.
They loved them.
I find it a wonderful tool, and even older kids will do it. But we've used it a lot, and I feel bad that we've kind of gotten away from it since the pandemic, but the therapists are kind of just now getting ready to go back out again. So, the sand trays, the portable sand trays are easy to put together. The only difficulty is you got to pick them up and carry them.
I have one in my car, and I got the Tupperware at Goodwill because I found just like the perfect shape.
Right.
And I didn't realize, so I filled it with sand, that the
It was going to get heavy.
well, the lid doesn't fit on properly and
Oh.
it's heavy. So I'm trying to, I don't know, I'm thinking like, I'm gonna get a better Tupperware or something, but it is in my car. I have it. Yeah.
Well, and you know, she's saying that it's heavy. It is heavy. You can also do smaller Tupperware. It doesn't have to be huge, that you can pick up and carry. And the therapists have gotten some really great stuff from sand tray. When we call it, I call this an aggressive world. These kids had both witnessed domestic violence and they were living with grandparents. But there's a lot, when we process the sand tray with these two little kids, there's a lot of aggression in here. There's tanks, there's lions, there's animals, there's soldiers up on rescue vehicles. There's all kinds of stuff going on here. But the therapists have gotten some really great stuff from sand tray. When we call it, this is, I call this an aggressive world. These kids had both witnessed domestic violence and they were living with grandparents. But there's a lot, when we process the sand tray with these two little kids, there's a lot of aggression in here. There's that we had to help these kids work with. But this was the one that I wanted to show you because this this was a great sand tray. This kid, I think, was 12. No, Joey was 8, and his older brother Jonathan was 12. And Jonathan was our client. Jonathan was really, really acting out. And I think I showed you Wall Around the Heart in one of the other modules. Maybe I didn't, but actually Jonathan had drawn the wall around the heart. But Joey created this sand tray. And the parents were always in conflict with Jonathan because he really had frequent outbursts, and the parents were fighting with each other because that's what happens. You know, you got an acting out child, you got two parents that have different ways of dealing with it, and the mother was kind of in conflict with her husband because she thought her husband was too harsh with Jonathan. But this was Joey. And he shared when he got all this done, he said to the therapist, this is angry dad here, but he's really just trying to protect his son. He said, these are all the other members of the family hiding over here that are conflicted about what angry dad is doing, but angry dad is just trying to protect the family. And he put all of these barriers. These are all soldiers. You always got to have soldiers in your sand tray. But these are all the soldiers that are all aiming their guns at angry dad. And he said, my dad is just misunderstood. I just thought that was a wonderful sand tray. And I think this is the last one I'm going to show you. This kid was a sexual trauma victim, and he was going to be adopted. And then the adoptive parents found out that he had sexual trauma. They decided they didn't want him. He ended up in a group home, but he told his therapist that he was hiding in this house. This is a house, and there was a bridge, and the security guard from the children's home was protecting him over here. He was protecting him, and he was hiding in the house. And these were all the animals that were around him. If you do sand tray, you always let the kid tell you what the figures are. You don't say, well, this looks like an angry lion here. It could be a protective lion. But we've done a lot with our adoptive families with sand tray. Please use the adoption playlist. We have all kinds of things in it that we have gathered, and we have books that we have had here. We have, there's a lot of little videos that we've pulled off YouTube and put into the playlist for adoption. Some of the books are great. Some of the adoption books are not. What I have found is that it's really, really hard to write a good children's book about adoption. And what you tend to see happening is that people write books about bunnies that were adopted by raccoons, and raccoons that were adopted by ducks. Somehow it seems easier to stay in that metaphor of that the little raccoon that is adopted by the bunnies is somehow different, but then he becomes a part of the bunnies. It's just difficult. I've bought a lot of books off Amazon, and then you can't, the problem with Amazon is that you can't preview them. So I would get them here and go, oh, I don't know about this one. But what we've put on our YouTube channel are the ones that we think are helpful. And then we just suggest to the therapist that they use those books. And we're going to do one more thing, and then we're going to wrap this up. This is an adoptive family. This was Terry and Rick. These were the people that I talked about before that had adopted several children, but they had 5 adult children. And they adopted a sibling group of 2. They were Mexican children, and the mom was incarcerated. I never had anything to do with the biological mother, but the mother was incarcerated, and the judge gave the 2 little boys back to the dad, to the bio dad. And the bio father ended up killing the baby sister. The baby sister was 18 months old. And she died of blunt force trauma to the abdomen.
Oh, my God.
His baby. And Alex was my client. Alex was probably one of the very first clients that we had at Circle of Friends. And actually, it was Glenn Castle, who was the CEO of the CBC of Seminole at the time, called me. We were brand new. Circle of Friends had just started. And he asked me if I would meet with this family. And he asked me if I would meet with Alex, because Alex was in the home when the dad killed the baby sister. And he didn't know that, well, he did know that the baby was dead, but he held his baby sister on the way to the hospital. And he told me afterwards that he knew she was dead because she wasn't breathing. I think she was 18 months old when this happened. But he was very, very fearful of his biological father. He's honestly, Alex is one of the only kids I have ever met that did not want anything to do with his biological family. And I think it was so connected to the trauma of what happened with the baby sister that he just couldn't separate it. And at the point that I met him, he was absolutely terrified of his biological father. And I will just say as a disclaimer that this is public information. This was a case in Seminole. It was public information. The whole case was in the news. It was reported on because it was a very sad case. But Rick and Terry wanted to adopt Alex, and I asked them if they would meet with me because I met with him, and I was going to just do individual therapy in the beginning with Alex, and I think he was 8 when I started this, and I had a flip chart like that one that I'm pointing at that only Rebecca can see in my office. And what I often will do with the kids is say, okay, if you need help, who's on your safety team? Who do you have that you can call? Who's on your safety team? And I think I referenced another little boy, the sibling group of 4, that I showed you their pictures, the 4 African-American brothers. I did that with Cautious, and Cautious had nobody on his safety team. He couldn't think of anybody that he would call. For one thing, a lot of our kids are afraid of law enforcement because they've had negative experiences with law enforcement, and they don't see school personnel as helpful because they've had negative experiences there because of their own behavioral difficulties. So he just could not come up with anything. Now, in contrast, Alex had been with Rick and Terry for a while, and he was a very connected child. And he was able to immediately say to me, these are my safety team. My parents, my Rick and Terry, as he called them at the time, they're my safety team. I know they'll keep me safe. So I met with the 3 of them together, and the stated purpose was we were going to develop a safety plan for Alex because he was really frightened. And I always use this example of this first meeting with this pre-adoptive family because they were just the quintessential perfect adoptive parents. And so Alex came in and he is trying to explain to them why he's afraid of his father. These people lived in a 2-story home, and he was very afraid that even though the father was at the point in prison, he had been sent to prison, but he thought his father could get out. He thought his father could climb up the side of the house and get in the window. They had a 2nd floor bedroom. He was absolutely convinced that this was going to happen. Along those same lines, he told me that when he was at home with the bio dad before the sister was killed, that the reason he never tried, he knew how to call 911. The reason he never called is because he was convinced that his father would know he was doing it. Even though he wasn't with the father was gone. The father would leave them alone all day, and he would not call 911. And he knew how to call Rick and Terry because he had been with them before. But he said, I couldn't do it because he would have known, and he would have come home and he would have heard us. So magical thinking is something that our kids get into. And this little boy thought his dad could climb up to the side of the house. So, so Rick said, what do you think we should do? And Alex said, well, I think we should cover the window with plywood. Um, so Rick just pulled out a piece of paper and he started to draw and he said, okay, well, what do we want this to look like? And he drew the rectangle. I think it was a jealousy window over this that he wanted to cover. And he said, how do you want me to do this? And so Alex drew it for him. And when they came in the next week, he said, we went to Lowe's, we got the plywood, I put it on the window and he felt so much better. And then Terry said, well, what else could we do? And he said, well, you know, when you and grandma are sitting watching television, he could get in and he could get upstairs and he could find me in that back bedroom. And the way the hall, the house had a stairs and then it was a hall, and he and his brother were in a bedroom down the hall. And he said, I think he could get in. I think he could find us. And she said, well, what do you want us to do, Alex? How can we make you feel safe? And he said, let's just put a lot of safety lights around. So she said to me, I had enough lights in the upstairs hallway to land a small plane. But she did it. They just did it. They didn't say that's silly or, you know, you're safe. Um, the thing I like so much about these people is that they just met that kid right where he was. They didn't say this is stupid. He can't hurt you. He's in prison. They could have given him all those reasons. If all those reasons, if he was thinking here, if he was thinking with his prefrontal cortex, and you said he's in prison, that would have worked. But he wasn't. He was thinking with the amygdala. He was thinking with the frightened part of the brain. So they just established trust with him right in the beginning. They did the plywood on the window. They put the lights all through the hall, and they established safety. And that's what I liked about these people. They have always been my favorite adoptive family to work with. So when we're looking at what kind of steps for our treatment, we're going to meet with our parents first without the child. And then you can do this in any fashion that you want, but typically, if you meet with the parents first for your first session and find out what their expectations are, and then meet with the child and find out what the child's expectations are, then you can get them together. And then you can say, this is where we are not jiving here. This is what you're hoping is going to happen. This is what you're hoping is going to happen. How can we put those two things together? Um, we go through this with our therapists when we staff the cases. Do you want to, is it time to split them up again? Maybe you need to split them up again and check in with people. It's kind of like marriage counseling. You know, when you do marriage counseling and you meet people together and you're not getting any place and you say, okay, it's time to split up so I can figure out which one of you is having an affair. That's usually how that goes. But it's kind of the same here. You meet them together and then figure out maybe it's time to check in with the child, see how things are going. Maybe it's time to check in with the parents, see how things are going. But you're always going to be looking at family building. And when I say family building, we talked about this in one of the other videos. You know, it doesn't have to be complicated. You heard Amy say you can plan a meal together, you can plan a vacation together, you can plan an outing together, you can figure out what book you're going to read together, as long as you're doing it together. You can draw together, you can do sand tray together, as long as you can figure out what it is that you're doing. Now, I know I went through some of that kind of quickly. It sounds to me like two of you have got to leave anyway, so we probably would want to be able to wrap this up. I did send you guys the ACE test. I hope you got them. The ACE test is the easiest thing in the world to do. You can do it yourself. And then if you have more than 4, you can worry about yourself. But most of you probably don't. And take that ACE test and look at any child that you're working with and do that test for that child. And you're probably going to find that most of these kids are at least at a 7, usually an 8. And that will give you some indication about the level that you're dealing with here, that you're dealing with a lot of trauma that has to be unpacked and dealt with. You're helping adoptive parents to do that. You can give the ACE test to adoptive parents. If you find that you've got parents that have got significant ACE scores, then there may be some extra work you need to do with them. But it's a wonderful therapeutic tool. I didn't send you guys the handout. I forgot, and I apologize because I was out of the office all day yesterday, but I can take the videos out and send it to you if you want to keep it in a folder on your desktop or whatever. Charmaine mentioned that she is coming to the refresher. Are we doing that in August? I think it's in August. I can't remember. Yeah, because art therapy is, our art therapy is July. And then we're doing the refresher in August. I will tell you too, we've only got one more Circle of Friends training in October, and it is the one on testifying in court. And I really, really ask you all to come to that one, because nobody likes to testify in court. And it's,
Yeah,
it
I
really,
was a nervous wreck.
yeah, nobody likes to do that. So, and we've had some difficult situations with therapists being called to testify in court. I spent many years on the witness stand, and I've always developed, and I always do that training. So you might want to keep that in mind because that's October. And then we will have one more that we're going to be doing, which is the, you can get your certification to be a certified clinical trauma professional. That's, I think that's a 10-hour training, and we'll do that in November. And then we'll wrap up our training for the year. So, again, I will send out training certificates to all of you. I'm always glad to have the GALs join us, so please feel free if you want to come to anything. It's absolutely, we're happy to have you. And if there's anything, you have my email address. If there's anything that you want to add or say, or you thought about it, maybe you don't want to say it in front of other people, just send me an email. I want this to be a good experience for you. It's a long training. I know it's a long training. It's long to hang in there. So, but I appreciate all of you coming, and I hope you all have a good weekend. And I hope my air conditioning is fixed when I get done with all this.
I hope so too.